Oh, we're here. We're waiting for our theme tune to play. Okay, well, everybody's here. Get started. Hello, it's me again. It's me, Martha, and with the amazing Cam. Cam, I've missed you. It's been 3 months since we've been on screen together.
It's been forever. Literally in the chat when we were saying like we're gonna have our faces on the same screen. It's been way too long. I was really excited to see your face like appear.
No, it's been great. It's nice to have the kind of red as well. Normally it's like black and like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. Anyway, so I'm sure, I hope that you all haven't had enough of me. I know I've been in shelter quite a lot, but this time we're here to talk about something a little bit different, which I'm quite excited about. So Max approached us to run this session to talk about movement building, but kind of more than that, talk about bring together a group of people who have done incredible things against the odds, essentially, and who have stuck to their values, even when it's been really hard. And I'm really glad that I'm joined by my best friend who keeps me to my values every single day, Cam. Why don't you introduce yourself? Because not everybody knows everything about you.
Cool, thank you. Hi everyone. I know some of you guys, I'm sure, that are on the call, but I'm Cam. So I guess daytime, I'm at the British Red Cross as Support to Experience in the Support to Experience team. And then I was going to say, and then nighttime, but that's not quite. Actually, it probably is true. It's where we spend most of our time doing all our activism. And then at nighttime, I'm at Charity So White, an organizer at Charity So White with Martha, really thinking about how we can push the sector to dismantle racism. I'm sure most of you have heard of Charity So White, and we're going to do a little bit of a talk about kind of what we've been up to as well. I guess I've been doing a lot of other little bits at the moment, looking at there's a group Beyond Suffrage, a program which is also helping women of colour specifically to get into trustee positions. So I've been quite instrumental in that, I guess, at the moment. But yeah, I'm just here, there, everywhere, hanging out with Martha across the sector, doing some training, running some sessions.
I love that. Literally, we just hang out across the sector. That seems to be our vibe. It's really interesting that we were approached to talk about movement building. And I have a lot to say about it, really, because, like, firstly, I hope everybody remembers the session that we had. I'm like bringing everyone back. I hope you were listening to the session that we had in the Day of Anti-Racist Learning by Nim Ralph about movement building. And I want to know, Cam, do you think that we've started a movement? Do you think that we are a movement? What do you think?
It's a good question. So I'd say probably before Saturday, when me and you had a little bit of a chat, I would have definitely said that like we had started this movement, and it was because of us that the charity sector, although I mean I still think partly true, that the charity sector were checking itself before it wrecked itself. But actually, I'm kind of following the conversation that we had the other day. I think I really liked your perspective on it in terms of being a lot more part of a movement, because I guess if we are the movement itself, then it isn't a movement, it's just us. So actually being kind of part of something that's bigger than us is the whole point, was what I kind of understood from what you were explaining. But I do think that there's been, we're not the movement, but I guess there has been a movement within the charity sector kind of pushing it forward. And I think, yeah, ourselves and Charity So White and the work that we've been doing has kind of been at the forefront of that, especially in terms of kind of really inspiring people and bringing people along the journey. I think that's been kind of really key part. But you gave me like a really good like 101 on what movements are. So yeah.
Well, I like to do my homework. I like to pay attention. I was literally like enthralled in the day of learning. Like I was like getting really stressed because I know I had to do like, you know, the hosting of the sessions, but I was getting like so intricately into every session, like typing my notes furiously. And what I came away from the session with Nim Ralph was a movement is about, you know, different groups of people coming together towards a shared goal, a shared social goal. And that movement will include academics, institutions, and activists. And I guess we would be the activists. Would we be the institutions? You work for the Red Cross. You're also part of Charity So White. Do you even call yourself an activist, Cam?
No,
me neither.
I don't. I don't know. I feel like it has this like negative connotation. Is that bad? Like I feel like it means that I must be out here. I don't know. I feel like it's got a negative vibe. So I'd rather call myself an organizer. I don't know. I feel like that has like a softer vibe. It's that fear. It's that risk. It's that like if I call myself an activist, am I like sticking my neck too out? But actually, it's what we're doing. The work that we're doing is activism. What about you? Do you call yourself an activist?
I let other people call me an activist. I think that's what I do, because I'm not, I mean, it was by accident. And something that's interesting about movements is often the people who are in movements don't know that they're in movements. And the only time I realized that I was seen to be building a movement, part of a movement, was when I was asked to do this session.
Right, it's when other people say it.
Right. And I feel like I've kind of just been like plodding along, trying to get rid of the barriers for people that look like me. Didn't even really situate myself inside like the global anti-racist movement. But ultimately we are. And the movement is so much bigger than us, right? And that makes it kind of exciting, but also I think there is a danger with, you know, people and organizations thinking that a particular group is the movement. So people can often think that Charity So White is the movement, but really we're just very loud.
Just loud and out here doing some cool stuff.
We're very smart. We think outside the box, and we're willing to take risks. And I think that's something that all of the speakers today are going to be talking about what it means to take a risk, and whether it's gone well, whether it hasn't gone well. And yeah, I'm very excited because
I was just thinking. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Cam. No, you go ahead.
No, you. Just when you're talking about movements, I guess like there's something that's really come to my head just around like if you have to define yourself as like the movement, then it feels a little bit actually inauthentic. Like the fact that you said that it's when other people kind of recognize that that's what's happening, and often by accident that it happens. It's not something that you kind of like necessarily, like you said, set out to do. So there's something a lot more kind of authentic and natural and kind of organic in that movement kind of forming on its own, which I think is what.
You haven't said organic in a while.
Organic.
Gosh, we're bringing it back. This is the movement building lingo here. So let's talk about Charity So White then. Something I find quite inspirational about us is the fact that, you know, we are 12, I'd say, is it 12 of us? Pretty much 12, predominantly women of color, predominantly under the age of 35, all under the age of 35, maybe not, one not. And we individually, we have little power. We have very little power. Like hardly any of us are in like, you know, leadership positions. Actually, there's only one person who would be in a senior leadership position, right, in Charity So White. And we know that in order for us to be able to do the work that we do, we have to use guerrilla tactics, which is something that makes us exciting, and something that I really admire. And you'll see this kind of throughout history, like when small people are going up against big people. And I know you can explain this a lot better in your like little bit on organizer training, but it's like a David and Goliath situation, right? David didn't fight Goliath with Goliath's tools. And as I think it's Audre Lorde or Maya Angelou said, like, you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, right? So we use what we have, which is humor, we have sass, we have a very, very, very good grip on technology. We don't play by the rules. And that allows us to live our values. And that allows us to be a kind of, I guess, like a beacon for values in the charity sector. Because I genuinely think that we do. I think that we discuss values all the time. We live our values as much as we can. We talk about our values in every single conversation that we have with people in the sector. Cam, what are our values right now?
Honesty, humility, hope.
Done. Never forget it.
Pledge to Charity So White.
What does that mean, Cam?
I guess like that honesty, in the sense that like honesty that we haven't kind of got things right to date, and kind of making sure that we're really honest with the fact that we might not necessarily kind of always get things right, but really open to kind of being to admitting that. And that humility, that's my favorite one, where we're kind of looking at the fact that even though we might not know necessarily like that perfect approach, it's not going to stop us from trying anyway. I really love that, because I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I have lived experience, of course, but me and you talk about this all the time, and I think it's part of our bonding about like just not necessarily having to be.
I literally sent you a voice note last night being like, why do people think I'm an expert?
Why? But that's what's beautiful about a movement, right? Like, or like being a part of a movement, or being part of Charity So White, being part of a committee or an organizing group, like, because you don't have to be the expert. Like, it's okay to kind of hold your hands up, which I think is something that the charity sector hasn't always done. It's okay to hold your hands up and like have definitely not always done, you know, and say like, actually, we don't know. And actually, it would be really great to have a discussion and see if other people know. So I think that humility is really important. And then lastly, that hope, which is all about action. Like, we believe that we will win. It will take some time, but it's not going to stop us from getting there. And I think that kind of innate belief that it's going to happen, that we will dismantle racism across the charity sector. Hold on, maybe not the world, but the charity sector, I think for us is, something that keeps driving us forward. So I think those values are really dear to us. And I try and live them actually just, I was going to say outside of Charity So White, but Charity So White is my everyday.
It's in our DNA now, isn't it? It's in my blood. I really like the humility bit as well, actually. I really, really do. And it's something that allows me to kind of move beyond imposter syndrome, because I don't need to be white leadership in order to be a leader. And I finally, this week, for the first time, I have said, hand on heart, I am a leader of the charity sector. Right, I know. I said it on a podcast yesterday. Yes, I was like, I am a leader. I know, right? And like, I have been so reluctant to kind of take on that word, because of the connotations that it has with, like, you know, white leadership, and like what it looks like when you're like the CEO of a charity, and how that's just so not me. But actually, when we look at what this leadership has enabled, I wouldn't want to touch that name with a barge pole, you know.
It's scary. Like, what we're doing is scary, and I think, we have to admit that, we have to name it, right? It's a part of that kind of journey, realizing that. And as you talk about that kind of leadership, it makes me think about some of the organizer training that we've been doing. So as part of Charity So White, for those of you who don't know, so we've been running a kind of organizer training for people of color across the sector, who want to take action within their organizations but don't know how. Now, obviously, with the rise of like see the rise, the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement after the murder of George Floyd. So many people of color within their organizations, especially Black people, were like being looked at as the people who were going to kind of drive the organization forward. And of course, like, you know, I guess it's in our own interest to want to do that. But actually, like, our job titles aren't in EDI. They're not in like diversity and inclusion. Like, me and Martha are fundraisers. We say this all the time. So I think we kind of recognized that there was a real gap and need for people of color to kind of have a way that they could take action and start to kind of think about that in a more structured way, and kind of using organizing as a way to do that within their organizations. So that's been really cool, kind of really getting people of color together. We took them through a sort of 5-part series to really become confident, I think, in kind of using and thinking about some of those tactics, like guerrilla tactics, like you mentioned, Martha, and thinking about the power they have collectively. Again, back to your point, like, as individuals, they don't view themselves as leaders or the ability to be able to make change in their organizations, but actually collectively, if you think about a strategy and you think about some of the tactics and what it is that you really want to make sure that you win on, it's possible. And so we've been really kind of working with them to do that. But I think what's been the most beautiful thing to come out of that kind of organizer training, and actually what we didn't expect, was for them to all come back to us and be like, actually, we just really love the fact that we're in a space with people of color, and we're building relationships, we're making friendships. And actually that's been a really big way, aside from the skills and the kind of tactics that we've been teaching them, that actually they've been able to take action just by sharing things with each other. And they've got like their own little Slack group, and they share things with each other and they learn from each other, and like they build those relationships. And again, like Martha and I, like, those conversations happen at night. They don't necessarily happen in the working day. And I think that kind of collective power and that kind of breaking down those barriers of just the professional has been really instrumental in them kind of building or being part of their mini movement and taking action, which I think has been, it's been amazing for me to watch. We're hoping to organize some more.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I find BAME networks quite interesting when we look at kind of, you know, systems change. And often BAME networks can be very, as Mac calls it, fun, flags and food. Is what he calls it.
I've never heard him use that phrase.
Oh my God, like, you can talk to him about it. You'd have a great conversation. But there's so much that a BAME network can be, right? And there's so much kind of power in like organizing and coming together, and like, I guess like creating a different kind of leadership. I feel like I'm kind of getting over this kind of like, what is a leader trope, and like really kind of rethinking what it means to create leaders. Is a leader actually someone who sits with a CEO title, or is a leader someone who leads by their values, right? Just came up with that just now, Cam.
I love it. It's a slogan. It's a slogan. Next BAME conference.
Oh, let's talk about the BAME conference then. Last time Cam and I were together on Fundraising Everywhere, it was to deliver the dopest conference of all time. I have to say, it was the best thing. It was the best thing. Second only to Shelter's Day of Anti-Racist Learning.
Remember where you are.
And it's so funny because, again, like, completely accidental, right? So I'm going to kind of give you some context of how I ended up hosting BAME Online. It's a tragic story. At Charity So White, we like to do a check-in before every meeting, and I'm gonna use the framework of our check-in to explain to you what happened in my life, BAME Online. And we use personal, political, and professional. So let's start with political. We just got into lockdown. Charity So White had just written one of the best papers on the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on people of color and racism in the charity sector's response. We'd just seen a report from Ubele Initiative that said 87% of BAME-led organizations were set to fold in 3 months due to underfunding. And at the same time, we'd seen another report that said 1 in 10 charities overall was due to fold due to underfunding. And that kept me up at night, right? So we got that, we got the political. Professional, Oh my Lord. I was meant to start a job at the Roundhouse. I had left my job at Refuge after raising £1 million in a year. I'm just going to drop that in because I'm in a fundraising. I'm like, I'm a good fundraiser. so I was like leaving on a high. I've raised £1 million. I'm so excited. I'm about to go and start work at the Roundhouse. I admire their work so much. I love music. I love the arts. You know, I was super, super, super excited. Then COVID hit and I was stuck. Roundhouse couldn't take me. Refuge had already hired someone in my place. And I was unemployed. And like, I was in a really, really, really difficult position. And then personally, I'd literally lost all of my confidence, you know, like all of this stuff, like none of it was personal. Obviously, I didn't lose my job because like I was rubbish. But you can't help but feel that way, right? So I was in like a really like crap place, essentially. I was on the phone to Cam all the time. I was crying every single day. And I really didn't think that I was good enough. And then I got tagged in the advert from Fundraising Everywhere. And it was so like, it was just, the advert just did not convey what it was going to be, you know? Like, it was like, looking for someone to curate this conference. It's going to be 5 days of work. Who knew that I would end up pouring my life, my blood into this conference? I gave it my everything. And it was incredible. I brought my best friend along, right? So that I could host it with somebody that I knew, that I loved, that I trusted, right? So that we could host it as ourselves. And this was the first time ever that I brought my whole self to work. And maybe the same for you, Cam? God,
yeah,
I'm like, don't be
crying. I think it took me a while. I'm not going to cry. I still think it took me a while to get to that point, even in the Bain like online conference. But yeah, first time.
And it was, you know, it was amazing. I was able to bring my entire self, including my values. And that was really, really important. We spoke openly about the things that really mattered to us. We spoke about the things that the white charity sector was afraid to speak about. And instead of pleading for a seat at the table, instead of pleading to diversify panels and pleading for someone to take us seriously, we just made our own table. We brought some folding chairs and we politely invited white people to join us. It was untraditional, completely different vibe. Not even untraditional. It was just lit. Like, it was fun. It was great.
It was our vibe. It was your vibe.
Our vibe. It was our vibe.
Our vibe.
But the point of it all was kind of through all this work that Cam and I have done over the last years, we've been taking a risk. We've put our jobs at risk. We've put our friendships at risk. Honestly, I've actually lost more friends doing this work than I thought I would, you know. And there's something to be said about, you know, like taking a risk for your values and really putting yourself out there. Like, I know there's a lot of people that don't wish me well and don't want me to succeed, right? Because my success means that they lose their privilege. And I think that's really, really scary for people to confront it, right?
Yeah. That's also when you know you're like doing something right.
Cam, Cam's just written in the chat like swears at me. Oh, F them. I
wrote it in the chat for a reason. I'm trying to protect this image I've got.
Oh my God, yeah, that's true. That's the thing. Like, a lot of it is like, you know, how much are you willing to put on the line for to do what's right? And I think I'm really excited about these sessions because we've brought together some speakers who have put it on the line, who really have, you know, in small organizations, in large organizations. In one of the organizations, the National Trust, we've got Tiger D'Souza who's coming. And National Trust is literally one of the pillars of England. And however, they did something extraordinary to salute Black Lives Matter, more than to salute Black Lives Matter, because this is what goes beyond what Black Lives Matter really was about. It was about doing the right thing. And you know, telling, yeah, right. I'm super excited. I can't even remember what I wanted to end on because I'm too excited.
Max has just said we gained new friends as well, which I think is important to recognize. I think, yeah, like you said, there's definitely that risk. And I feel it every day, and I'm still not sure if I'm as far along in that journey as you are, Martha.
I'm really
you're like all the way. But yeah, gradually kind of sticking my neck out more and more. But I think like you were saying as well, like unless you're gaining some enemies along the way, like you're not, like that's how you know that you're actually kind of getting to a point where you're going to dismantle something. You're actually going to make change. Because people don't like going against the status quo, like you said, especially if it benefits them. So I think that's the kind of sweet spot, and the bit that actually does excite me. It's just, as I said a little bit earlier, like it's a scary thing, but then you get to see kind of what happens as a response. And I think one of the things that I know you wanted to touch upon was around thinking about it as a marathon and not a sprint, in terms of kind of movement building and bringing people along, but also in terms of our work, social justice and the goal and winning, and really making sure that you're kind of taking that time, the peaks and the troughs throughout it. There'll be some big highs and some lows. We feel it with Charity So White. I think we feel it with each other as we're kind of going on our journey and transitioning. But having each other has been super helpful to take us.
I know I say it all the time, but I just would not be able to do this without you. And that's fine, and that's important. And the relationships that you build are going to be what gets you there. I keep bringing up the same old proverb. I've told Cam this proverb 150 times this week, and it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And BAME Online was huge. It was such a big deal, right? But to me, it was just one tiny part of my massive mission, right? Which is to create a new generation of leadership. Yeah, leadership that's unafraid, leadership that is willing to take risks, leadership that doesn't have the job title, right? Leaders who are leading by their values, because I think that is more important to lead than to lead by job titles. And I think the people that we're going to show today are all people who have led by values rather than job titles. And I'm super excited because I'm like, Cam, you're a leader too, Let's lead.
Together. Does that help, actually? Lead together.
I'm literally like, I wish I could hold your hand across the screen. Just like, I did Cam's nails over the weekend. Mate, let's just not even get into this. Nails.
Right, I'm going to bring on our exciting speaker.
Right, I'm going to disappear because otherwise I'll just be distracting. So please take me away, Stephen. See you later, Cam.
See you later. Hey! Hi, another friend on screen. Hey everyone, I'm going to stop talking in a minute, but hey again, I said hey earlier. But yes, we've got Rebecca with us today, Director of Strategy and Operations at the Resource Alliance. And Rebecca's going to tell us a little bit about kind of how they've been a unique part of building kind of global movements, or empowering people to kind of continue to build global movements, and hopefully offer us some inspiration on kind of how we can do that too. So yes, definitely over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and it feels really timely as well, given the place that the Resource Alliance is in at the moment. So I'm Rebecca. As Cam said, I'm one of the directors at the Resource Alliance. And for those who don't know anything about the organisation, we have a 40-year history that's a relatively unusual one in that we're a non-profit organisation, but we exist to support and empower other non-profit organisations around the world. And when we were founded around 40 years ago, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. It was to bring together people at what is now the IFC, so the International Fundraising Congress. So some of you may have heard about that, but it's essentially a big fundraising conference that takes place in Amsterdam every year. We would normally be going there in a couple of weeks, so gutted about that, but instead we are, of course, bringing things online. And I wanted to talk very briefly today about our experience, about who the Resource Alliance are, what we do, the shift that we've gone through, particularly over the last 12 months, and what movement building means to us as an organisation, and some of the learnings that we've had, particularly over the last 12 months. So, as I said, we're a non-profit organisation who exists to bring together, normally in person, but increasingly, of course, online, social movements, those who work in fundraising, in comms, in activism around the world. And we deliver capacity building programs, but also events. And over the last 12 months, we've made quite a dramatic change that has been accelerated thanks to COVID, to go from essentially what was, for us as an organisation, 90% of our resource, whether that's financial or human resource, was focused on this one big event. Now, as fundraisers, I'm sure everyone is going, well, that's slightly mad. Why on earth would you work in that way? And actually, of course, that's what we've been challenging ourselves on over the last few years. We really must diversify our income. What if this cash cow of the organisation goes to pot? What else do we have up our sleeves? And if I'm honest, we were a really long way away from being in a place where we were able to say, actually, we've got this amazing range of products that we're focusing on. And then COVID hit. So over the last 6 months, we have built this, we've shifted our entire operational model from this one large in-person event, global conference, to a membership model that enables us to reach a whole range of new audiences. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us, but also something that has been incredibly challenging. So IFC existed as quite a premium product. Really, we were targeting senior leaders within the nonprofit world. Often attendees and those who came to our events were directors of fundraising or founders of organizations. And what we've created is a model that is equitable. So the way that people engage really depends on where you're based in the world, and what your operating budget is and how much money you have to spend and your capacity to spend or not. So a model that's equitable but also accessible to all. So obviously being online enables us to do that. And why have we done that? I suppose there's 3 key reasons. So one of those being that it's what our community demands of us. It's clear to us that there are so many people who haven't been able to access the content, the resources, the support, and the connections that the IFC as an event offered. The second reason being because that's what our manifesto is all about. We, like many organisations, have these grand mission statements, this incredibly powerful manifesto, and actually the way that we were delivering our work, the way that we were delivering our programmes didn't really meet that manifesto. And I should say at this point, we're still only at the beginning of that journey. We're nowhere near there yet, but shifting so that absolutely our manifesto is at the heart of what we're doing. And then thirdly, because frankly, it makes business sense. And actually, as I touched on, we needed to diversify our income. We needed to be able to respond to COVID and make sure that we could replace the income that we were missing out on as a result of that event being cancelled. So working for the organisation is certainly a very interesting place to be. We are as I said, we've got a long-standing history, but at the same time, it definitely feels like I joined as a volunteer initially. I was a consultant. I had my own business, working with nonprofits and agencies. Initially as a volunteer, and then have moved into a role as a director. And my day-to-day role, even though I am the director of strategy and operations, can include doing social posts, editing, copy, running the payroll. It's really varied, and we do operate in a startup fashion because there are only now 5 or 6 of us. So as Cam and Martha talked about earlier, it's definitely a labour of love, and it's definitely somewhere that I definitely bring my heart and my soul when I go to work, and I definitely think that enables me the drive and motivation every day. That and the fact that as a startup, or as we operate in the model of a startup, I know that we have to do our very best. We have to bring our very best every day to make sure that the organisation still exists and we're still able to serve the people within our community. So those are the reasons why we've changed to this model. And I guess the next thing that I wanted to touch on is what movement building means to us. And even in talking to Cam and Martha a little bit about the Resource Alliance, I felt sort of proud of the fact that this is a journey that we're now on, that actually in lots of every day, it's easy to see us as a non-profit organisation. It's easy to think about that bottom line and what we're there to do, why we exist. It's harder to see ourselves in that way, and I'm sure other speakers will sort of reiterate that sentiment of. I don't see us as a movement, but actually, when you look at the work that we've done, I know that we are on a really exciting journey and building a really special, exciting community. So, movement building to us, there are three again that I think about, and one of those is volunteers. As I mentioned, we're a really small organisation. And what we're building at the moment is a team of teams model. So it's very flat within the organisation. It's deliberately not hierarchical, and there's lots of overlap, which has its challenges, of course, within teams. So we have I essentially kind of do teams within the organisation and advisory panels around that. So we have a whole series of advisory panels, volunteers, ambassadors who work with us and give their time to support in multiple different ways. So because of that small staff, it means it enables us to be led by and for the community and the people that we serve, placing them right at the heart of the work that we do, so that it's not decisions that come from the board or the staff team, but decisions that come from the community. And of course, it has its challenges, which I'm sure we'll touch on as well. Secondly, it's around shifting the power. So building collective power amongst our community, challenging the traditional models and encouraging people to really take their work to the next level outside of the world that they may have seen before. And I think even within our programme, our monthly content at the moment. So again, we've moved from this one-off event to monthly content, lots and lots of activity year round, and every month, rather than the traditional fundraising content that we might have delivered in the past, face-to-face fundraising month or major gifts fundraising month. We're talking people power, digital revolution, new models of leadership, and really trying to open people's eyes and keep focused on the ultimate mission and the ultimate goal of those organizations, rather than focusing on the tools and tactics of getting to that place. So shifting the power and challenging traditional models. And then the key part for us is about empowerment. So supporting organizations, and this ranges from global NGOs. We work with the global teams at Save the Children and UNHCR and UNICEF and Amnesty, through to tiny one-person organizations in multiple countries. I think our last major online conference had 15,000 people from 150 countries. So it's a really, really broad group of people. And for us, our role is to empower. And I had a conversation with a board member really recently who's challenged me on this new global community and saying, well, what is it about? Is it about giving people answers and telling people, what to do, and passing on our experience and knowledge? And we said, no, absolutely not. It's about providing a platform and a space for individuals and organizations to come together and form and build and share ideas and solutions together. And I think that's what we're about. We're in a really unique position in that we are building a movement of movement builders and of fundraisers. So we're not one single cause. We work with medical organizations, those focusing on poverty alleviation, education, arts, all across the board. So that's a really exciting position to be in. Of course, again, lots of challenges as well. And then finally, I guess I just also wanted to touch on our key learnings, and there are many, many of those. The key things for us being around really understanding our audience and really understanding the people, not only that we have within our sphere, but also the people that we want to engage with. It's challenging to think about, how do you unite those organisations? How do you unite the exec director of UNHCR with a junior new fundraiser who has launched a new fund for building a well in their village? Those sorts of people. How do you bring those people together? How do you get your messaging, call to action, with such a diverse audience. And that's something that we still challenge ourselves on every day. We haven't got the answers yet. Secondly, history, understanding our history, respecting history. And when I say history, I'm often talking about individuals who are really bought into the organisation and have a sense of what that organisation should be. And then how we build on that history and move things into a new place. And then finally, the risk that's involved. And for us, we've had many losses over the months, over the years, many failings. We've lost people, we've lost supporters, we've lost income, but all because our drive and desire to make sure that we are really aligned with our values and that we really can do our very best work for us and, most importantly, the people that we serve. And one key learning from me as well, finally, is to learn from global movements. And I think what I love most about my work is the fact that I get to meet so many interesting, smart, passionate people from such a broad range of organisations and countries, and I think I definitely came into this world, into this organisation with a UK mindset, believing that to an extent we as fundraisers in the UK, change makers in the UK, knew everything, and actually I learn every day from amazing examples from across the world. So I really feel passionately that global movement building is all about learning from each other and working together with shared goals and finding those shared goals.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. I know that was just so much. It was amazing, and really interesting to hear how you've kind of been. I think the thing that I found most interesting was taking it back to what your values actually were already, and going back to that point. So yeah, I think that was incredible. Just before we leave, I know that we've only got 1 minute. Martha's literally chasing me away. Just the call to action. We wanted everyone to give a call to action to kind of shelter before they left. So what would yours be?
I think mine would definitely be around learning from other worlds, other communities, and really drawing on those excellent examples of leadership, of global movement building, and going outside of your usual sphere. And that may mean going outside of our sector, it might mean going outside of our geographical region, but really challenging ourselves to learn from really powerful movements, and whether that's political movements or something completely different. I think that for me is my biggest learning, and my biggest call to action is to really challenge yourself to look at what other people are doing and learn from those experiences.
Cool. Thanks, Rebecca. Well, I think we're getting kicked out now. But thank you so much, Rebecca. No worries. Take care.
Everyone can see and hear me now? I can't see me on the screen. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just like talking. I don't know if anyone heard that. I was like, are we there? Hey, everybody. It's me, Martha, again. I am so excited to be hosting this panel. When I was asked to do this event, I was super gassed because this was an opportunity for me to get people that I really admire together so that I could ask them a bunch of questions. So I think this is just as exciting for me as it is for everyone else. I'm not going to go through and do loads of bios because I really want you three to talk about your own work from your own mouths without me reading. But I'm just going to say hello to Gabby from Bloody Good Period, to Tiger from the National Trust, and to Catherine. Can I call you Kat? Is that all right? Kat from Grenfell United and other things. So I'm just going to kind of point to you on my screen, and then if you want to just give us like 5 minutes talking about what you do, your organizations, something that you've done recently to kind of stick your neck out, since we were on the topic of sticking your neck out, and any kind of challenges. What were the losses and gains that you had from that? So let's start with Gabby.
Hiya, good morning. Please excuse the Hoover in the background. It's not all glamorous at BGP. So hi, I'm Gabby. I'm the CEO and founder of Bloody Good Period, and we're a charity which gets menstrual supplies and menstrual education to asylum seekers, refugees, and just anyone in the UK that can't afford them. we've been running about 4 years now. And when I started BGP, I was absolutely sure that this wasn't just going to be any old charity or organization that gets people products. It was always going to be the fact that I felt that periods are sort of the starting point for so many discussions. So, of course, obviously, you can use periods to talk about gender. You can use periods to talk about sex. You can use periods to talk about, obviously, inequality. But you can also use periods to talk about things like race, politics, all of that kind of stuff. And so that was all the kind of stuff that I was thinking about when I was setting up BGP. And I guess sort of one of the biggest challenges has been bringing that back in. So when you sort of get on the road of starting an organization, there are all these sort of admin things and all these things that come in, you know, and charity commission and fundraising and all of that. And the stuff that you really, really care about and the stuff that really started off what you're doing can actually just get pushed to the wayside if you're not really careful. And it was about 2 years ago that I sort of grabbed it back from myself, you know, not from anybody else taking it over, and was like, this has got to be an anti-racist charity. Basically, we can't do this. We can't work with women and people of colour and with Black women and with refugees if we're going to be, you know, just someone who pretends that race isn't part of the equation and who also pretends that race isn't a huge issue in the charity sector. So yeah, I think the sort of most scary and sort of sticking your neck out bit for me was saying, okay, actually, we're going to have to invest in this. We're not just going to say what we think. So at the time, we had an all-white board. I'm white functioning, I guess you could call it. And most of our team were white as well. And I took a look around and I was like, this is not okay. So we had to do some really big thinking and really big changes and spend quite a bit of money actually, which is always a really sort of awkward thing for a charity to do because your sort of audience, often all they want you to spend the money on is the actual thing itself, but it's impossible to actually do the work unless you've done the groundwork. So yeah, I don't want to go on too long, but I think that was the sort of biggest moment for me where I was like, oh, okay, something's got to change here and I've got to be the one to do it. Yeah, I'll leave it there and then maybe I can come back to that later if you'd like.
Awesome. I feel like that was kind of like a real example of the humility that Cam and I were talking about before, that kind of like looking and being quite honest with the fact that like looking around and being like, oh, I haven't got this right. And I'm going to do something about that. So yeah, great to hear about that in practice. Thank you. Tiger, do you want to go next and tell us what the National Trust has been up to?
Thanks, Martha. Yeah, good to be with you all today. So I'm the lead for inclusion at National Trust, and you may have seen a little bit of media stuff about us recently. My camera's gone crazy. It looks like I've got like the world's biggest, brightest sun behind me, and I can promise you it's not that bright. Anyway, so we have had a program around thinking about how we could become a more inclusive organisation. I've been working on that for just over a couple of years. I'm fortunate that I've got, you know, a leader at the top of the organisation who is 100% committed to the agenda and everything is in scope. So we've been able to look at everything across the whole organisation, from rewriting our values to positioning inclusion explicitly in our strategic aims and ambitions, overhauling our recruitment approach, and being comfortable as a senior leadership team being uncomfortable. And we took a kind of like a logic model type approach. So we had a theory of change approach. We were starting to just get going. And then obviously COVID hit. And I think one of the biggest challenges for us about COVID is it threw us back a bit. And in terms of sticking our neck out, I think organisationally we had a moment of realisation when the latest surge of Black Lives Matters erupted in May. And organisationally, I think we were going through the throes of trying to manage through the pandemic, and it was the first real test for us. And I think we, on reflection, would say that we didn't deliver the way that we should have done based on our aspirations and the work we've done previously around inclusion. So we have fast-tracked a piece of work around telling the stories of colonialism and slavery linked to our properties, and we released that in September. And I'll kind of wrap up with a kind of like a tale of two Septembers. So last year in September in 2019, we announced a 3-year partnership with Alzheimer's Society to make all of our sites dementia friendly. And you know, everyone loved it. You know, media, members, you know, it's everyone associated with the National Trust was really positive about that direction of travel. And I think the recent release of the report this September has had a different response. There's been a lot of positivity, and I think that's given us a lot of I think from an organisational standpoint, it's helped us to feel that we are moving in the right direction, but we've also had a bit of challenge. And I think there is something in our learning from this process about staying committed to your values and beliefs, and the recognising that, you know, things won't always go swimmingly, and that there will be some challenges in relation to that. And hopefully us moving forward, we'll be able to continue to pursue that agenda and to help both the nation understand and appreciate the complex and sometimes uncomfortable elements of our history. So I'll pause at that point and hand back over to Martha, and hopefully try and sort my camera out.
No, it's great. We've been writing to Tiger in the chat, me and Cam, that he is the star. The sun is shining from him. No, it's been really amazing, and like anyone who's spoken to me in the last couple of months will know that I have been talking about the National Trust endlessly, because it was one of the most exciting things I've seen from a large organisation that is predominantly white. That was like kind of the image I have of the National Trust, and the image that I had for pre-September, and the image I have now is like totally different. So I'm really glad I've actually got the opportunity to speak to you. Last but definitely not least, Kat, tell us about some of the incredible work that you've done and the challenges and the things that you've gained.
Sure, yeah, and also I saw the National Trust campaign, Tiger, and I thought it was great. And you know it's great when you're getting criticism. If you, what is it Simon Cowell says, if no one has an opinion, then you're not doing the right stuff. So I'm glad you did it. So I'm a campaigns and communications consultant, and I work with, I mainly focus working with people that have experience of social injustice to help them kind of campaign, understand politics and media so that they can speak out and change it. And I also do a bit of work with NGOs who are thinking about how do we work with activists better, how do we work with the communities that we're wanting to serve better without co-opting them and bring them more into our work. So that's what I do. And when Martha kind of sent me this question, I was thinking I can either answer it from a kind of more personal perspective and some of the value decisions I've made in my career, which I'm happy to do at some point, which have led me down this path. But also, I think what I wanted to share with you a bit about was one of the groups that I work with is Grenfell United. They are a group of bereaved families and survivors from the Grenfell Tower fire. And they've taught me a huge amount. And I think this question about knowing your values and sticking to them and taking risks is one of the areas that they've really taught me about. And I work with them and sort of support them with their media work and thinking through their campaigning and how they want to go about making change, but they set the direction, they make the decisions. And they did a couple of things before I got involved that I think has held them in a really good place, and that we constantly refer back to when we're trying to make decisions about what to do next, what tactics to take, and when we're getting criticism or they're getting criticism from people. And those are, you know, who do you serve and who do you work for? And I don't mean work for in terms of who your boss is, but what are the communities that you serve and you say you represent? Coming back to them constantly, what outcome are you aiming for? I think people get bogged down a lot in tactics, and actually what's the outcome you're going for, and then what are your core values? So for them, who they work for and serve is the affected families, and they're super clear on that and come back to that constantly. They're aiming for change and justice, and their core values, a word that they constantly talk about, is dignity. And that word dignity has actually led them to make some very interesting choices that not everyone would have made in their situation. So knowing those three things, that's made them sit down with ministers who are partly responsible for the deaths of their loved ones, sit down with the local council who are very closely responsible for the death or murder of their loved ones. And if you think about what it takes to sit opposite people that have played that role in such a tragedy, It takes huge courage, but it takes that decision that we are going to behave dignified and to get the result that we want, which is to make sure the families we represent get rehoused, get supported, get change. That is a really difficult decision that we're going to make. And it wasn't the decision that they necessarily could have made. There's so many ways to protest or to campaign to cut decision makers off, but they made that decision to negotiate and sit down with people. And it's been interesting, and they've sat down with news. I remember going to a meeting at the Times, and literally one of the campaigners holding his nose walking into the Murdoch building. But we were there to tell the Times that they had the story wrong and that they weren't covering people respectfully. And through that meeting, we got the paper to change their editorial stance on the whole issue. So it's not without criticism. And 3 years on, when you're really looking for change, and they have made some change, but it's slow and frustrating. There's a lot of people that, would criticize that approach, but they constantly come back to that dignity. It doesn't mean they're not tough. And actually recently they wrote to Generate Q, offered them a meeting, the Secretary of State, and said, we're not going to meet you right now. We don't want to see your face, because he is making deals with private property developers, and that just gets to the heart of what they've been through, and how can you sit opposite us for these months and then go and have those meetings. And I think sometimes charities and NGOs, you can be very, so if how many would turn down a meeting with the Secretary of State, right? But they basically said, F off, because you're not living the values that we live by, and we've shown you nothing but dignity, and you're showing us this disrespect. So they make a lot of value decisions, but the dignity is at the heart of it, and they're not afraid to be punchy, and there's risks with that, but they are also the fact that they have been dignified has been what's held them a place in terms of a seat at the table that's quite hard to dismiss them on. They've also done some work with Shelter, so I can talk about that a bit later, but that's what came to mind around this question of values. And when you're thinking about campaigning, who are you serving, what is the outcome that you're aiming for, and knowing your core values can help you make the right decisions as you progress through something. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. There's something so interesting that you said there, Kat, about kind of people mistaking being values driven by not being tough, and I find that really interesting, because I think my mum is like the toughest person I know, yeah? And like, she is like completely values based, right? From a kid, she was like, make friends based on values. Like, that's the only thing that matters. Your friendship should be based on your values. And like, I've kind of lived that my entire life because I've had someone doing that. But like, people think that if you're very values based, you're soft, right? And like, values is like synonymous with like maybe like weakness, because it's like not economics, not strategy, even though they are all kind of like intrinsically linked. So I really liked you using the word not tough. That's really made me think. I feel like my values make me tough because I know where my boundaries are. I can be very clear. Amazing. So let's just get straight into the questions. I have fluffy. That's the word. Cam said values are fluffy. And I'm going to stop mocking you, Cam, for being fluffy all the time, because I'm sure it means that you're really tough. So I have a question for you, a few questions. And the first is about fundraising. I am a fundraiser, a reluctant fundraiser, I'm going to call myself. And we are at a fundraising event. So let's talk about fundraising and about kind of how you use images and stories, if you use them at all. How intentional, I'm going to ask like a lot of questions at once, so just feel free to answer as a paragraph. How intentional are you about the language that you use around the people that you serve, and also the language you use for your donors? How do you communicate your commitment to social justice to your donors? And does it differ from individuals to corporates to trusts, etc.? Does it alienate some donors? Lots of questions. Gabby, why don't you go first? Because I know you've got a very interesting history of fundraising.
Sure, yeah. I think I really identify with that idea of a reluctant fundraiser. I hate fundraising. It's not the bit I like. And I think because of all the reasons that we've grown to sort of understand why, don't worry, I like doing fundraising a different way. I hate the idea of traditional fundraising, that especially in charities, that you put a sad picture, you say somebody's story, and then the money comes in because old ladies cry. And I never really worked in charities before I worked in the arts, but I did work in a charity phone, you know, like you called people up and asked them for money, and that was sort of my most eye-opening moment, to actually how people respond to the stories that you tell them. Actually, people most of the time, like, they don't want to know. They don't want to be bombarded with sad stories or stuff that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. And I think that's just part of human nature. But I think the most important thing about Bloody Good Period is we deliberately, I mean, from I think the first moment that we started to become an organisation, I didn't want to show photos of the people we worked with, and I didn't want to tell their stories, not because I don't think they're valuable and important. Of course, they are hugely important. But when we're talking about periods, when we're talking about menstruation, when we're talking about people's intimate body parts, actually, it's a really uncomfortable situation for many people. And I didn't want to make anybody feel that they had to have a sort of transactional relationship with our charity. I didn't want anyone to feel that in order to get the products from us or to receive education, they had to extract trauma. They had to give their likeness, you know, give their photo. They had to be part of our movement. They may not even believe in what we do. And quite frankly, at the time, and probably still now, we didn't have the time or the capacity to ensure that every single story we told or every single photo we had came with a real full understanding of what that meant to have your photo or your story told to people in order to raise money. And so actually we found that we don't need to do that. I think there's also a really obvious sort of colonial element of look at these poor people. And what, you know, the poor people, their race is more often than not white. It's not white. And what does that tell us about how we feel about people of color? You know, if that's all the sort of picture that people get. And it's a really inaccurate representation, basically, of the people that we work with. So we're really, really strict about that. There's no sob stories, it's facts. We tell people this is how much it costs to menstruate, this is how much an asylum seeker receives. The maths doesn't work, basically. Shall I answer some more bits of your question? Because there's a couple more bits.
Yeah, go ahead, keep going. That's really interesting.
So that's the sort of main thing that we think about. And in terms of language, we are absolutely, I was going to use a rude word, but we are completely strict about the language that we use. So from talking about the words that we use to do with menstruation. So we don't use the word sanitary, we don't use the word feminine hygiene, we don't use the word hygiene, all of these things, because they either make menstruation into a dirty thing, they don't include trans people. And again, I think it's really interesting because one of our banned words actually is dignity. So we never use dignity in terms of menstruation because coming from me, or coming from like a mostly white like charity sector, there's such colonial undertones of giving dignity to people. And that's not to say that I don't think the word dignity has huge power elsewhere, but in terms of menstruation, I think it's a really dangerous word to use because it really harks over to, you know, missionaries and people going over to different countries, or even people just sort of doing a sort of volunteerism. I, white woman, bring you dignity. Like, I can't think of anything more hideous. So we're sort of super strict on that. And in terms of whether we talk differently to our funders and audience, not really. We expect that our funders understand that these are the rules that we have. I mean, obviously we're more formal, you know, with our, if you sort of have seen our like social media, like we're very chatty, we're like, you know, the friend in the classroom who likes to talk about periods. When we talk to our funders, obviously we're more formal, but we still are really strict on that kind of wording. And even if they use a certain word, so even if they refer to beneficiaries, we say people we work with, because we don't get to say whether they benefit or not. They, you know, that's not my call to make. So we're quite we're quite strict on that as well, and quite like neutral throughout, not neutral, quite keep a sort of really same tone throughout, I think, in terms of our language. I've jumped around. I hope that answers a few questions.
No, I think that answers a lot of questions. I think that's really brilliant. And actually, like, you know, it's so important to be able to have examples of like the fact that you can have these boundaries and it's okay. And a lot of it is some of it is like that perception of like the colonial perception of funders can like make you play into it more than like you really need to. And I know that Charity So White, we categorically do not take money from foundations. We're just like, nah, you guys can go do something else. And so I totally kind of understand that, like, you know, there is so much power in putting your values first, and actually you can lead that conversation. Like, you don't need to be deferential to your funders because you're all striving towards the same goals. Kat, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, so I'm not a fundraiser by background. I'm having to do some fundraising for this for the next project I want to start, and I have a new world of sympathy for you all because it is challenging. But I think from what I think about when I do my work is I don't think about telling a story. I think about how you change a narrative and change narratives. I think Gabby does that brilliantly in her work as well. And also a lot of my work is not talking on behalf of people. It's supporting people to do their own thing and be supported in that way. And not just, I think we can think about sort of storytelling as very tokenistic. And particularly with the Grenfell survivors, it is like, you know, for the first year after the fire, you know, journalists wanted them everywhere, right? But they wanted them in a very tokenistic way. Come on our show and be a victim and talk about your victimhood. And actually the group that I work with, they couldn't be asked with that. They don't want to be rolled out as victims. The only motivation they have to do press is this going to help me, you know, give the government a kicking, give RBKC a kicking, get closer to what we want to change? Like, is this going to help me from a campaign's perspective? So actually, you know, there's, you know, a bunch of journalists that we work with that want to do that story, that want to tell people as campaigners. I have had huge arguments, including with like the Editor of the Day program, for like taking people on, saying they want to talk to them about campaigning and treating them as just victims and no more. So you kind of have to fight to do that work, but that's a lot of what I do. And then I think the two other things I just say in terms of the only little bit of fundraising I know is that we know we're lucky that we've got a lot of reasonably high profile people that support behind the scenes in different ways, sometimes financially, sometimes, you know, shouting about Theresa May on the Brits or whatever. And I do think maybe this lesson can apply more broadly to fundraising, but people want to be involved, and sometimes that's by giving money. And actually an act of giving money and making donation should be seen as the activism mix. Like, there are a lot of tactics and tools that we need to make progress, and fundraising shouldn't really be decoupled from the change that you're trying to make in the activism journey. And I think a lot of NGOs that I talk to, sometimes the fundraising team and the campaigns team are really siloed, and actually the more you can do to break that down and see fundraising as part of the activism mix and part of building the movement, one, it changes internally, but also externally. I think it will change how you talk about fundraising and how you ask people for money and why you're asking people for money. So there's that, and there's the sort of supporters that we work with. Some of them are very private about it, but all of them, it's not just a kind of transactional. They are involved, they're connected, they feel part of it with us. And then I think the other thing that Gabby sort of touched on as well is around I think hope and action and progress are real motivators. And I think sometimes I'd like to see more NGOs thinking about that story rather than the very negatives, you know, victim stress story. Like, how do you bring the hope and the action? And certainly in the campaigns world, winning something and getting some progress is actually the biggest motivator for people to stay connected and keep going. So how does that translate into the fundraising world?
That's such interesting observations. And it's funny because Cam and I both Cam did telephone fundraising. I did street fundraising for a while. So I agree totally. I never, ever got a sign off or anything based on telling a sad story. Generally, it was about building a nice relationship with someone and actually like listening to them talk about their days, and being like a little bit of an outlet for people. It's all about relationships, really. And I have a question about relationships, and I'm going to swap over the questions that I sent you because you've touched on, Kat, something that's really important. So for this, to run this session, I did some focus groups with shelter staff, and I met with fundraisers, and then I met with the campaign teams and policy and comms to kind of see like what the relationship was like. And like you said, Kat, fundraising and campaigns and comms sometimes don't work hand in hand when ultimately they are like the same part of the same limb, right? It's like two fingers on the same hand, and I think there's something that's really, really important about kind of building that relationship and like, you know, not really seeing yourself as like one tiny function of a piece of work. You know, you're not really a fundraiser, you're kind of like part of this mission, right? A finger on the hand of the mission. And I want to talk to you about relationships and about kind of, I guess, what relationships you need to build with other teams internally, and also kind of what relationship you need to build with yourself in order to do this kind of work, because it's like living your values kind of goes beyond just the professional, right? So Tiger, I'm going to go to you because I feel like we've left you out a bit. What kind of relationships do you need to build kind of internally, but also what relationship do you need to have with yourself in order to drive real values-based work?
It's a good question. I think in terms of internally, I think the conversations I've had with the organisation have predominantly been with the organisation as a whole. And it's been about setting out the future of where we want to get to, but also understanding that future from other people's perspectives. So I think quite often you end up with conflicting directorates or departments within organisations when everyone feels like they're driving their own agenda, which is kind of like a variation on the common truth, rather than having a conversation about understanding, right, if this is where we want to get to as a whole, what do you need? How can I help you to get to where you want to get to? And I think what that does is that builds up an amount of relationship capital in the bank. So people get the fact that you're interested in them, you're interested in their aims and objectives, you're there to help them when they're struggling with particular issues. And then at a time when you have to have a difficult or challenging conversation with the organisation, when you need to stand up and say, look, what you're delivering is cutting across this agenda that we've all collectively signed up to, you've got a platform on which you can actually have that conversation and get a meaningful response, rather than it feeling like you're browbeating or being unhelpful in the way that you're challenging. So when Black Lives Matters happened, I was able to have a really frank, honest and open conversation with the organisation, both as a Black member of staff, so as a person of colour within the organisation, but also as the leader on inclusion, to say we're not doing enough, and had the capital in the bank for them to be able to be responsive to that and to recognise that we hadn't done what we needed to do, and then to be open and asking what can we do differently moving forward. So, recognising we won't all be perfect. And I think that there is, on a personal level, there is something about understanding what you need in order to recharge, because some of the work that I'm doing particularly can be quite draining personally, but also taking a breath and being willing to take a step back to see the bigger picture, because sometimes you can be so emotively driven by the thing that's in your area, in your world, that you are not cognizant or aware of some of the other factors at play, and actually some short-term hard and fast challenge might actually impact on both yours and theirs long-term objectives.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, fundraisers are really kind of tied to their KPIs, and that can be the driver. It's like, we're doing this event, we're doing this campaign, this is what the end goal is. It's X amount of money, it's X amount of supporters, X amount of this. And that can so easily make you lose sight of the bigger picture, what you're actually striving towards for that kind of short-term win. Tiger, you've touched upon self-care, and I think it's really worth talking about that. I, again, wouldn't call myself an activist, but let's just, for the sake of it, I'm a reluctant activist / fundraiser, and I can get pretty tired quite easily. And I can imagine for all of you, like, this work is intrinsically personal. It's important. It's life's work. It's life work. How do you look after yourself? How do you avoid burnout? And how do you actually communicate, even when you don't really want to the people that you need to tell that you're not okay, Anyone can start talking. I don't know who the person is. Gabby?
I think the most important part of self-care as an activist is you must be paid. Like, I'm not saying you have to be paid for every element of your activist work. That I do Jewish activism stuff that I don't get paid for, but I am paid for my job here, which I think it's so crucial, and it's so often we're sort of convinced, especially as women, and I think especially like people of color find this as well, is that you do it for the cause, you do it for the cause, you do it for the cause. Like, no, you can't. You have to be able to not have to be panicked about how you're going to pay your next month's rent. I think that's honestly like the most important part of self-care and activism, and I think it has to come first. Therapy, I think, is really important. I'd have therapy every single week, and I don't think I could do my job without it, to be perfectly honest. And also, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's also an activist, and she said that I had said to her, which I was very pleased I'd said, because I didn't think I had, like, you have to stop at 6 o'clock. I mean, you can choose your 6 o'clock, but there's always going to be work to be done. And so you might as well have a really nice life around the time that you're going to be doing that work. It's crucial. It's not a sort of extra to be having a social life, to be having a lovely life. You can't do all the work at once. Like, you can't. It's just not going to happen. So you have to build in that abundance and build in that health and good like feelings, I guess, in order to do the painful work, because often it really is painful, and you can't have one without the other. You need the dark and the light.
Agreed. Those are really good, actually very good and practical ways.
Go to therapy and go to bed.
I know. Go to therapy. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, I think going to therapy is definitely the answer. Kat, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, plus one to everything Gabby said. I would say definitely, I mean, so yeah, therapy for sure. And I was quite late to go into therapy, and I kind of wish I went like years sooner. I think working with people that are going through trauma, you have to, like, for me, I show up in that room as a professional to support them. And so I need to show up able to do that. So dealing with my own therapy separately, having boundaries, like, 100%, like, we are not saviors. We are not going to fix situations. We can support people and help people, but we are not fixing someone's situation. So knowing when you are getting too involved, where your ego is too much at play, and knowing when to have that boundary. And my other thing that I would say, especially for like big organizations like Shelter, I really believe this, that I think the self-care discussion is important for individual activists, but I actually think organizations need to start having conversation about welfare of their staff. And if your staff are working with people that are experiencing trauma, and that doesn't have to be the trauma that I'm talking about with Grenfell. Trauma is, whole kinds of different trauma, or people in difficult situations. If you as an organization are not talking about what is our budget to offer counselling and how are we offering these services to our staff, how are we debriefing staff, how are we training staff on their welfare, then you are being of a disservice to your staff, and you're putting them in difficult situations. So conversation I had at Change, we were working constantly with people in very vulnerable situations, and there was zero conversation about any support to campaigners there. And I ended up campaigning to get us to bring in Mind to start developing a program to do that. I don't know, I left, I don't know where it's got to, but for me that was just a huge missing point in terms of actually organizations' responsibility to their staff who are doing this work. So I think if that's not something that's a conversation at Shelter, particularly for those of you that are working, with clients, etc., and people that you work with, then that is a conversation I would encourage you to start having, and not letting the kind of self-care be the excuse that organizations don't fulfill their duty on that.
Just a quick one, Martha. It's just something very practical that I do, that everyone kind of like lost their heads over at the trust when I joined, is my out of office when I'm not working. So when I go on leave, my out of office says I'm deleting all emails when I come back. And I delete all of them. And I showed people I did, because people didn't believe me. They thought, oh no, he's going to do some kind of filtering. It won't happen. I literally came in, select all, delete. And I just say that I'm going to delete them all when I come back from work, from holiday, back to work. I'm back on this date. If it's important, send it to me again on that date. And it's now where people don't. So I've seen the volume of emails people send to me when I'm on leave go down. And actually people with ones that are important do come back to me, but it's a fraction of the total number, because I think booking in regular annual leave time, taking that time so you're properly, truly away from work, and then not coming back to a mountain of stuff that undoes all the relaxation that you've had is really important.
Yes.
I'm sure you saw my jaw drop. Oh, what? That's amazing. That's brilliant. I'm doing that. But what I actually did is I put an out of office on because I was super busy. And then people started sending me twice the amount of emails because they'd be like, oh, I see that you're out of office. And I was like, no, it's so much worse. That's brilliant. I'm going to try that. I'm trying to think of what my self-care tip is. But we've been talking about it in the chat. My self-care tip is Cam. I mean, I shouldn't rely on one person for my self-care, but like genuinely, like having a work wife who has like the same values but very different tactics. Like I'm very hardline, and Cam is like, you know, the softness and the fluffiness to like my very hard rock. So I feel like you definitely need a team of people behind you, right, who you trust and who trust you and who you can cry in front of. Like, I'm just gonna say that's a really big part of it. I'm a big, thank you so much, Cam. Cam's starting to me in the chat saying how much she loves me. Anyway, I could ask you questions all day, and I realised we've only got about how long do we have left on this? I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna 6 minutes. Okay, wow. I'm gonna try and quick fire some questions at you from the audience because I've ignored them because I wanted to ask my own questions. But let's go. Kat, I have a question from you saying, how did Grenfell United decide on those values?
So they decided them themselves. So literally in the days after the fire, some of the survivors were meeting in a rugby club near the tower. It was one of the few places where press weren't allowed. No one was allowed unless you were a genuine survivor or bereaved. And they realized pretty quickly that other than like the amazing volunteer effort in terms of like institutions, no one was coming to help them and no one was really doing them any favors. So they were going to have to help themselves. And so they started to meet. But because, I mean, they're an amazing group of people, and Ed Zafan, who's part of that, you know, has been an activist for a long time. So within that group, they self-organized themselves. They held meetings. They held a huge meeting with over 100 survivors in a hotel, and voted on a committee, voted on values, and voted on a purpose. So all entirely self-organized in the kind of weeks after the fire.
Thank you so much. I feel like a lot of the questions have been answered, but I'm gonna ask this question, which says, how did you go about getting into communities and bringing them on board with your cause when there's so many battles out there for people to join, from Samuel? And I'll ask that to, I mean, anyone. Gabby, do you want to go first? If you can answer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's something that BGP still has work to do on. We've actually just put out a job description for this kind of work, because we realised that because we're so strict about not having any sort of transactional relationship with the product, that does sort of cause a maybe not a barrier, but like a sort of gap for people who actually want to get involved in the cause, who are already sort of using our services. So I think that's something that takes a lot of work. But I would say when there's so many battles out there for people to join, I mean, they're all intersectional, aren't they? Like, a lot of the time, and that's what I think you have to realize as an organization leader as well, is that like people will have lots of different battles that I mean, you can't fight every single battle, but if you're not sort of on board with at least 3, like, you're probably not realizing the intersectionality of injustice. So I think it's actually a really good thing, and people will come to you if you show them why you care as an organization, I think.
I like that answer a lot. Tiger, have you got anything to add to that question?
I think the only thing I would say is that it's about where we're looking at relevance and how we can be more relevant to more people. And I think, you know, you'll see that through the stories that we haven't told and recognising, but in doing that, there's a whole raft of people out there who don't see us as being a relevant organisation. So we like Gabby's mentioned, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of reaching out and displaying ourselves, portraying ourselves a different way. The challenge for us is that there are millions of people out there who love us just the way we are. So we need to be careful that, we continue to provide them with the product and the organisation that they signed up to, whilst at the same time helping us to reach out and engage with new audiences.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, something that I've wondered about is, you have this historical supporters, Tiger, and I guess you're like quite a larger, an older organisation. You've got your historical supporters, and then you kind of are like pivoting a little bit. Like, how do you bring them along without alienating them, or is it possible? Do you just have to make a difficult decision?
I think there are some people who have a very, very narrow view of who you are as an organisation and what you should do. But we do a wide range of things. There's loads of people who love us as an organisation who never set foot inside one of our built properties, never set foot inside a country house, because they love the countryside, they love the outdoors, they love the coast, and trying to make sure that we are sharing the breadth of what we do is important. But also, if we are making changes about how we present or the stories that we tell, that we do it in a way that isn't focused on one audience. It's actually, open and accessible to a wide range. So it is a challenge. It is difficult, but that we can't be everything to everyone everywhere, and we recognise that.
Yeah, I think that's quite a hard thing to have to accept. Like, it's like you want to be like I guess you want your organisation to be loved by all, because you're like, this work is so important. This work is so great. Like, I know that it's like passion stuff, mission stuff. Why isn't everybody on board? And I think sometimes you just got to let go of the fact that, like, you're not going to bring everyone along. This has been amazing, and like, I wish I could like invite you all to my house and we just like hang out at my table and I could talk to you for the rest of my life. But I'm going to have to end it here. However, I like to leave everyone with a call to action. So I'm just going to go through. Sorry, you have to make up your call to action on the spot. So Gabby's face. Kat, what's your call to action for everybody here today?
Mine's just going to be really easy. Follow Grenfell United on Instagram, on Twitter, and sign up to their list. And they have still a long fight ahead of them for justice. So keep remembering that. And when they do a call out and need help, be there for them. That would be great.
Thank you so much, Kat. And Gabby, what's your call to action?
Mine would be to look at Blessing Amakwu's article about introvism and look inside your organisation and understand that it's probably got a lot of work to do, and do some introvism as well as your activism, and follow Bloody Good Period. Sorry, I didn't.
I love that. I love how everyone's got this new kind of like ism thing, because like slacktivism is happening. I feel like Cam's always talking about slacktivism. Tiger, what's your call to action for everybody today?
I think I would go back to the conversation we had earlier on about self-care, and I think be kind to yourself and be patient in relation to what you're trying to achieve, and take people with you, and understand their needs on their terms, and don't necessarily believe that your way is the only way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm like smiling ear to ear because I've literally got to chat to my heroes today. So thank you so much for joining me. I think it's been really, really, really
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cam, come back. Grace me with your amazing presence. And we are here. Cam, I know it's only been 50 minutes, but I missed you so much.
There's too much time. I was like messaging you on this chat. I was like WhatsApping you. I was like trying to contact you in every way to try and tell you my thoughts about this panel.
So needy. Oh my God.
I know. That was sick. That was like one of the best panels I've ever heard.
Wow, I'm really glad. I'm really, really, really pleased, because like I had in my mind, I was like, I want these 3 people on my panel, and then I was like, I relentlessly was like, going after these 3 people.
Once you said you're magic something, it just happens. Like, it's actually magic.
Honestly, that was brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I've had such a nice day, and considering though, I'm not going to lie to everyone, I was quite nervous about delivering this session. Cam and I were like, do we have anything to say? Are we going to be, is this going to be good? And look what we've achieved. Yet again, we've smashed out the bag, Cam. Only possible when we do it with each other, I have to say.
Together.
So we're getting to the end of the session. We've spoken a lot about taking risks and living our values. And I'm like so sweaty. I was so excited talking to those three. And every single speaker has given us a call to action. So I'm just going to read you the calls to action that we have now to give Cam a little bit of time to decide on hers, because you might want to change it from what it was yesterday. So Rebecca's call to action was to learn from other worlds, learn from different communities, draw on excellent leaders and examples from global movements, look outside of the UK. Kat's was to follow Grenfell United on Twitter and to sign up to hear about their amazing updates. Gabby's was to read Blessing Amaku's article on introvism, which is awesome. I must say, which is awesome. I haven't read it, which will be awesome once I've read it. Stop lying.
We are one. We are one. I've read it, so you've read it. It's great.
Yeah, our brains are connected like that. And Tigers is really beautiful, which is all about self-care. Be kind and be patient with yourself, and bring people along. And Cam, did you want to share some things that have been said in the chat today?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple of the quotes that they've obviously been said by all of you guys, but they were like pulled out and highlighted in the chat. So people were really loving yours, Martha. If no one has, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Is that it?
Love it.
Something like that, right?
That's the phrase of the week, isn't it?
They were also loving, and I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, but like Kat said it in a much more succinct way. If no one has an opinion, you're not doing the right stuff, which I also loved. And last but not least, they loved like go to therapy or go to bed, which I was a massive fan of also. So yeah, lots of
you
nice
know me, I like to go
quotes.
to bed at 9:30 p.m. I'm like, Cam, stop messaging me. I need to go to sleep.
I need to take that advice. So that's kind of what we've heard. But I'm happy to do my call to action, and then you can end on your amazing one. I guess my one is, I think it is still the same throughout. Me and Martha take very different approaches to stuff. I do like tons of like prep so that I don't feel nervous. But yeah, I think it is, and it's just made me think about it more throughout today's conversation, that it really is about kind of that humility, like really accepting that no one in this conversation has known the perfect approach, but it hasn't stopped any of us from trying to kind of find those answers anyway and trying to do that together with others. And I think that for me, that's the biggest kind of, especially when you think about movement building, when you think about kind of going to your goal, about winning, I think that's like the perfect approach. So that's my call to action. And yours?
Mine, it's been hard, I've been thinking the whole time, like, what am I going to leave people with? But I think I'll leave with what I started with, is rethink what a leader looks like. Have a look at the people that we call leaders. Have a look at whether it's their job titles, their suits, or their skin colors that make them leaders. Is it the content of their character? Is it the values that they lead by? And look for other leaders. Look for alternative leaders who don't have that job title, but who are going up against it and sticking their neck out and living through their values and changing the world. Find those, elevate them, and help them do the amazing things that they are going to do.
Yeah.
I think that's my call to action for the day. And gosh, that's it. We've run over by 1 minute. I'm so disappointed.
I know you hate this. I'm like, yes, I've won this time. We've gone over time. Yes.
And there's a lag on this, so we're probably like 2 minutes late, which is even worse.
Honestly. Yeah, it's been wicked with you again.
I know. Thank you so much for coming, Pam. Like, I know you actually have like a full-time job, and like, I'm like, just like, please come hang out with me.
Thanks for helping.
I love you. You're an amazing activist, an amazing friend, and
you are an amazing leader.
So are you, man. So are you. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into our session. I hope you've learned a lot. I hope you feel inspired, because that was the plan. That was the aim. I hope that you investigate what your own values are. I think that's something really important. People don't know their personal values, and lead with those.
Yeah. Realign.
And on that note, should we dance our way out? Stephen, play the music.
We haven't done this in so long. Oh my
well. We've got 2 seconds. How long are we going to be dancing like this for? Take us off the screen, Stephen!
Bye, guys.